thyroid is a gland that sits right here in our neck. It's like a butterfly shape in the throat neck area. And basically, it is a gland that is in charge of our temperature gauge, our metabolism, but it intersects with pretty much every system in the body. So if the thyroid is dysregulated, then pretty much you're going to see a lot of other dysregulation. It could be hormone dysregulation, it could be blood sugar dysregulation. Lots of things can be affected. Blood circulation, there's lots of things that take place that the thyroid is really a chief operator of, right?
Hey everyone, Derek Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Risa Groux, welcome back to the Pain and Performance Podcast.
Thank you so much, Derek. It's so great to be here. I had such a good time the first time. I for sure knew I had to come back the second time.
I'm very excited. We were kind of talking about it before we started. I can't believe that was 2 years ago. So for those listening, the first time around, we went through kind of eating to decrease inflammation. We went through some of the most common and powerful food frames. We went through eating for autoimmune dysfunction. So all that was in episode 56. Go back and listen to that beautiful overview. I was telling Risa before we got started, we pulled a bunch of questions after that. We had, I don't know, we probably had like 30 questions that came through in some form or fashion after that. And the bulk of those questions surrounded thyroid health. And so what I would like to do is do a very deep dive on thyroid. What is it? How do people kind of look at that? What are they having when they have dysfunction? And I can't think of a more perfect person to do that.
Well, thank you so much. Let's go deep.
Let's do it. So if you are initially kind of talking to somebody about thyroid health, obviously, I think everybody has heard, I say everybody, but a lot of people have heard of thyroid. What's some of the we'll kick off with like misconceptions about like what the thyroid does, dysfunctions to it.
Yeah, so basically the thyroid is a gland that sits right here in our neck. It's like a butterfly shape in the throat neck area. And basically it is a gland that is in charge of our temperature gauge, our metabolism, but it intersects with pretty much every system in the body. So if the thyroid is dysregulated, then pretty much you're going to see a lot of other dysregulation. It could be hormone dysregulation, it could be blood sugar dysregulation. Lots of things can be affected. Blood circulation, there's lots of things that take place that the thyroid is really a chief operator of, right? So it is imperative that we make sure that the thyroid is stable and regulated. And so much it's a very complicated system. So what I say to people is, maybe you've gone to the science center and you started on the second floor and you dropped a ball down a track, right? And that track went through a domino set, and then it rang the bell, and it went through a tunnel, and it went through all these things. And then eventually it lands in the cup, and everyone's like, oh my God, I can't believe it landed in the cup. It did all those things. That's what your thyroid looks like. It has to go through all those things in order to create an active, free, available hormone that your body can use, meaning that's the ball that gets in the cup. And in conventional allopathic medicine, unfortunately, we really only test to see how many balls are dropping. If we're dropping a normal amount of balls through that track, we're just assuming those balls are getting into the cup. But that is usually not the case. Every now and then I look at labs all day, and every now and then I see one that works that way. But most of the time, something's happening between the drop and getting into the cup. And we unfortunately have not been trained in in conventional medicine to look at what those mechanisms are. So I order all 9 markers of the thyroid because there's bound hormones, right? All hormones that we bind with proteins typically. And then we have free hormones those are what's available to us. Those are what we use. So almost all the time I see labs come in my door from a conventional doctor, and they don't even test free T3. So we don't even know how much active thyroid hormone that you are having that's available, right? We're just going to guess.
In this, so the balls being dropped is TSH, like that's
exactly.
We're going to kind of bring that, yep.
Exactly. So it starts in the pituitary, which is the size and shape of a pea in the brain, and that's what creates TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And thyroid stimulating hormone gets created, and then it goes through the liver. That's why we detox so we have an optimal liver, and we create T4. T4 is our inactive thyroid hormone. It's 93% of that equation.
So T4 is after the dominoes. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of like the first step, right?
It's
It's
part of
like,
those.
it's exactly. And then after the dominoes, we should be cleaving off one atom of iodine, and we convert that into T3. Now that conversion process is extraordinarily important because a lot of people don't convert. Most people I find don't convert. Sometimes they do, but most often they don't. So doctors may test your T4, and often they're testing your T4 if you're even on medication like Synthroid, which is a synthetic T4. Well, sure, we know you have enough T4, but we're just assuming that you're converting and that we're getting the ball into the cup. But again, not always the case. So that conversion needs to take place. That active thyroid hormone T3 is only 7% of that equation. Now, there are several things that can affect it. Our cortisol, right, our stress hormone, can absolutely pull from our T3. Inflammation can pull from our T3. And T3 uptake, which is basically looking into sex hormone, or do we have an excess of testosterone or estrogen, or do we have an imbalance? And that is, again, going to affect the thyroid. And then, of course, I always look at antibodies because, I met with somebody yesterday, a new patient yesterday, and this is such a sad story to me. She was put on thyroid medication, a synthetic T4, in 2009. She just got tested in 2024 for antibodies for the very first time. So she may have had antibodies in 2009 or 10 or anywhere in between, but probably it's been going on for a while. Her numbers, one of her numbers, or TPO, thyroid peroxidase antibody, was 1,600, and her thyroid globulin antibody was crazy high. Sometimes we don't even see both antibodies, we just see one. And those are extraordinarily high numbers. So this tells me this has been going on for a long time. And that's very typical of the scenarios, right? We go to the doctor, and the average person, by the way, takes 6 physicians until they're finally diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. But in her case, she's been going a long, long time, and she's got a raging fire in the basement of this home, right? We've got massive inflammation, and these antibody productions are causing tons of inflammation, and the doctor gave her a little squirt gun. Here, try this.
Yeah.
And see if we can get you to not drop as many balls down. But we've got a fire where the ball's supposed to go. So we needed to get her a fire hose is what we needed, right?
So let's kind of take a little step back. There's multiple areas in here where even if we're having, kind of the let's say the right amount of T4, there's so many areas in here where the ball could get knocked off track, right?
For sure.
So I think that's why this gets difficult from a physician standpoint, is they're like, there's 7 or 8 steps, and anywhere along there, something could be off. How do we help patients? How do we work with patients whenever I have 8 minutes that I can talk to them about what's going on and what they're feeling? If somebody has any one of those, we can kind of backtrack through those. What's the kind of common disorders if we're not getting the proper thyroid function or the proper like T3 or T4 to T3 conversions? What's the main things that happen from those?
So typically what we see is hypothyroid, meaning that your thyroid is basically underacting, right? It's underperforming. So when we see that basically means that our T3 is low, right? We are an underachiever, right? And that means we're not getting the ball in the cup. And so what happens is we're going to throw more balls out, which is your TSH is going to go up. Now, our reference ranges are pretty wide. They change pretty much quarterly. They're reassessed. They don't always change. And some labs have different ranges, but typically they go to 4.5. Now, if you're at 4.5 or higher, this person yesterday was at 24. I've never seen it that high. But if you're, usually we'll see it maybe 4, 5, 6, something like that. 8's pretty high. But if you're high like that and being on medication, well, I'll get to that in a second. But if you're high like that, that typically says that something is low. So we're trying to produce more so that we could create the end result. And that's called hypothyroid, right? Now, if there are antibodies attacking the thyroid gland, this is what's called autoimmune disease because you are now creating these antibodies. And we do this long enough, and eventually those antibodies are going to find a gland, a tissue, or an organ in which to park itself, right? So in this case, we're talking about Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is when you're in hypothyroid autoimmune state, right? It's Hashimoto's. And so your antibodies are attacking your gland thinking that it's the enemy. And it's going to, keep attacking this gland until it is, it's going to eat away this gland, increases your chances of cancer, but you really want to decrease those antibodies because you just don't want a lot of inflammation and being in the state of inflammation. So anyway, so that is one scenario. The other
So
scenario, go ahead.
So yeah, before we kind of flip the coin over, so in people who have the underactive, I imagine that there's probably some symptoms that they would start to experience fairly early on. Thyroid has such a deep connection to energy production, and I think a lot of people have talked about that metabolism for sure. What's some of the hypothyroid kind of maybe lesser known symptoms? Often fatigue and weight gain, I think, is the big things that people talk about. But
Yeah, exactly. So fatigue and weight gain are huge. Weight gain without trying and very difficult to lose weight. Cold extremities. If you run cold a lot, or your fingers, your hands, your feet are cold a lot. Hair thinning, nails brittle. Usually the outside of the eyebrows start to go. Constipation's another big one. Not everybody gets it, but some people really have that. Anxiety will be another thyroid symptom. And irregular periods. So if you're menstruating and you're having irregular periods, it's that's definitely a sign to look at the thyroid. Those are very typical hypothyroid. And people can be some people walk into my office and I just feel like giving them a pillow and a blanket. They are exhausted. So that's usually when the T3 is really, really low.
it was interesting. We saw a very strange connection in people, and I wonder if this is the inflammatory process that gets started in people who had um, thyroid dysfunction of some sort and cervicogenic pain, whether that be like disc injuries or like musculoskeletal pain around the neck. And when you look at the location of the thyroid, it would make a lot of sense that inflammation and irritation in that area would cause a lot of muscular changes, a lot of nervous system changes. But it was such a high amount where you saw structural dysfunction that we were like, this is like a chicken or egg issue. Was there inflammation from the neck that caused some dysregulation of thyroid, or was the thyroid dysfunction the source that caused the inflammation and reverse caused some of the musculoskeletal or discogenic problems? And we started looking at a lot of that stuff. And I think that was the first sign when we were like, okay, we can fix the neck stuff. We can fix the musculoskeletal things. But if we don't get them into some help to improve the health of the thyroid, regardless of which way that was going, you're still going to have a dysfunctional or inflammatory process in there. And, we're not going to get our patients as healthy as we want them to get. And that was kind of like my first foray into let's start digging into the things that can affect thyroid function. But it was a very, very interesting correlation. Immediately, if we have somebody who comes in who's in that probably 30 to 45 age range and they've got some interesting neck pain, have you had your thyroid checked?
Wonderful. I love that you've made that connection. And yeah, that's just a perfect example of how interconnected our whole body is. And it affects everything. And that's one of the pillars. There's four pillars of functional medicine. And one of the pillars is that we consider the whole body one interconnected unit. And that is absolutely a perfect example of that.
So on the other side, hypothyroid, we have the underactive production of hormones. So hyper is going to be whenever it's spitting out more and more.
Exactly, exactly. And so what we see is a tremendous amount of T4 production. We're in overproduction, right? And the TSH can be low because the body's creating so much T4 that it will back off on the pituitary will back off on making TSH. But this is, heart palpitations and weight loss without trying. I know it sounds fun, but it's really not that exciting when you don't have control. Your body's like really gone haywire, and it's just in this overproduction. And then when you have antibodies attacking your thyroid, when you're in hyper state, that's called Graves' disease. And Graves' disease is interesting. I've worked with lots of people with Graves' disease, and most people will go from Graves to Hashis, but I've worked with some who are just Graves. So it's really interesting to find those mechanisms that is the causation of an overactive thyroid.
Yeah, such a fine line to get it. Like, let's not. To me, whenever I see those things where somebody is going from one side to the other, in any version of healthcare, I'm often like, we haven't quite found where the underlying dysfunction is, and so we're trying to kind of address a symptom, and it's
Exactly.
easy for us to go from one side to the other whenever we're doing that, and we're not getting kind of the natural balanced state of the body if we're just addressing symptoms. Let's unpack these, because I know if I'm listening to this and I'm like, I have dealt with either one of these. Like, I've gotten a bunch of conflicting information about what I should do if I've got hypothyroid, if I've got hyperthyroid, if I've heard of Hashimoto's or Graves. There's a lot of quick fix things that are out there for people. Let's kind of take each of these and see if we can unpack it a little bit. So if you were looking at, I know you kind of mentioned this, but I would love to hear, if you were looking at somebody with hypothyroid, what would their testing show? What would that look like on blood testing?
So typically we will see a elevated TSH. Now it doesn't have to be out of lab range because lab range, as I mentioned, the reference ranges are pretty wide, and in conventional medicine, we don't really treat you until you're in disease state. So we look at prevention, and so in functional medicine, we look between 1.0 and 2.0. Anything really outside of that, we're starting to look a little deeper. Now, if it's 2.5, we're looking, and it may not be, but it could just be a moment in time that you were tested. But if it starts to really elevates and it goes to, in the threes and things like that, and then so we see that the pituitary is working harder. Then we typically see either a lower T4, and we like T4, total T4, and all labs are a little bit different, but most of the labs that use LabCorp, we like those numbers in the eights. Anywhere from 6.5 to 8, we're in pretty good shape, maybe even 9, we're good. And then the free T4, we like about 1.5. Again, all different ranges are, all different labs use different ranges, but that's essentially where we're looking. And then, so somebody could be having maybe an elevated TSH, perfectly fine T4, but they're not converting. So, and that's a very common scenario, because I'll see that patient walk in my door and the doctor says, "You're fine. Your thyroid, your TSH is totally normal." And they test your T4 and your T4 is okay. It's in range, but they don't even test to see if you're converting. So they say, "You're fine." And they say, "I don't feel fine." And so they come in and we find out that maybe they're just not converting. Maybe they're lab low on T3. And free T3 is the star of the show. So if I can teach anybody anything today, it would be look and have your free T3 tested. Free means it's available, that's what's usable, and T3 is our active thyroid hormone. People usually feel crappy less than 3.0. So I'll get people at 2.1 even. I mean, they're really in bad shape usually. But most people walk in around 2.6, 2.8, a little bit low, or 2.4. I mean, these are the fatigue, can't lose weight, all of those symptoms usually are happening there. Ideally, we like it between 3.5 and 4.0, but as we age, we produce less. So the years and the decades I've been doing this, I realize anything 3.0 or higher, people usually feel pretty good. Right.
Gotcha.
But,
Yeah.
3.3 to 3.5, if somebody in their 40s or 50s would be ideal, right? They're great. Those are the girls that are eating anything they want, and all the other girls are going, "What?" So, that would be in that range. Those are the little kids who are running around and we're like, "Aren't you freezing?" "No, I'm fine. I'm good." So they're very regulated because they have enough T3. So that's what we look at is that free T3. So usually they're low in that. Now, again, another scenario is that their TSH is starting to get high, their T4 is low, and their T3 is low. So that's another very common scenario. Now, with that, then we look at reverse T3. Now, let's say your T4 is good, your T3 is good, but your reverse is through the roof, right? We like it 15, 14, 13, 12. Let's say you're at, 32. That's pretty high. So I'm going, okay, something is disrupting the thyroid production here. And so we're looking at in that case, systemic inflammation. So I'm looking at your inflammatory markers, and then we're looking at your stress level. Are you in high stress, which unfortunately most people seem to be, and that could absolutely be pulling from, because when you have high cortisol, your body is starving for nutrients. It's going to pull things that, it eats all our B vitamins, for instance, in our intestinal lining when we're stressed. So it is going to disrupt that thyroid. And then let's say your reverse T3 is totally fine, but your T3 uptake is really low. So we like that number about 30, 29, 28. I'll take 27. And let's say you're at 24. So usually for women, that's telling me, well, there's some kind of dysregulation. Usually it's an excess of estrogen, but not always, but it's some kind of an imbalance. If you start to go higher, let's say you're 32, 33, then it's usually testosterone. So somebody like who has PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, they are going to have probably a higher T3 uptake. Well, does that affect your thyroid? Absolutely. That imbalance of estrogen and testosterone is going to affect your thyroid. So we look at all of those markers as well as antibodies.
So if I know each of these probably has like slightly different fixes for it. What would that look like if we're starting to work? Hey, you're kind of in the early stages of some of this dysfunction. What are some of the things that people can start? The stress, I think, is brilliant. High cortisol. Look, if we don't attack that and get that under control, we've talked about it on here. There's so many downstream effects, but thyroid being a major player in kind of the one of those early stage dominoes of causing some of that whenever we have dysfunction. What's some of the correction stuff? Like, what is that person working through for the next few months to start getting this into a healthier state, not only from a blood level, but from a day-to-day life feeling level?
Right. So there's nutritional approach that I use and lifestyle approach, because both of them, as you just mentioned, are very imperative to stabilizing a thyroid. So as far as the nutritional support, I would say absolutely remove soy. Soy and the thyroid do not get along. So take all your soybeans out, your edamame, your soy sauce, and then of course your processed foods. Most of them have a lot of soybean oil. This is highly refined. It's highly inflammatory. Remove it altogether. Ironically, I get supplements sometimes brought into my office that people are taking, and I won't name the company, but it's unconscionable to me that they make vitamin D with soybean and vegetable oil. And it's more harmful than it is good. So there's no vitamin K for absorption. It's bad fats. It's horrible that's even legal. So anyway, so we have to look for soybean oil everywhere, right? It's in most processed foods, tons of salad dressings, and even supplements. The second thing I would do, nutritionally wise, is remove gluten. Gluten is an inflammatory food. If this is being caused by a leaky gut situation, gluten is only going to help worsen the leaky guts, the tight junctions in the intestinal lining. It just kind of rips them open and creates bigger holes in the intestinal lining. So take out the gluten and the processed foods and the chemicals. So I would do all of those things. What you need to incorporate is our whole foods, obviously, but two Brazil nuts have enough selenium in them that you need that selenium for that conversion from T4 to T3. So absolutely start having two Brazil nuts a day. Don't have more than that, but and make sure you're having enough seafood for some iodine and things like that for a healthy thyroid. So that's what I would do nutritionally, cut out the bread, sugar, dairy, alcohol, all the inflammatory foods, and move your body. Not too much. If you're having a hypothyroid situation, you do not want high impact. You do not want, evening hard workouts. You want more lower walking, yoga, things like that. So that's on the nutrition side. Now, on the lifestyle side, which I just started talking about the exercise, but in addition to that is definitely managing your cortisol. So unplug. It's really important to unplug and laugh and have fun and connect and put your feet on grass and sand and breathe fresh air and you don't have to meditate, but meditation's really good. Yoga, things like that, just to calm the nervous system and just unplug. As we all know, these screens are just not good for us 24/7. So you have to have some form of self-regulation to shut that down and take an Epsom salt bath. 2 cups of Epsom salts for 20 minutes or more will help balance out cortisol. There's tons of de-stress teas. Ashwagandha, licorice root, things like that are really helpful for the thyroid. So those are things. I have a supplement called OptiThyroid, which basically is for all the nutrients for function to make your T4 and for conversion to convert to T3. So there's, those things that will help.
I know every case is kind of individual. We've got a few kind of acquaintances that kind of living around the world. So certainly different areas, different access to food and stuff like that. But that have had some thyroid dysfunction and have had some by all accounts, very thoughtful practitioners doing some short-term kind of, I don't even like this term, but kind of carnivore-esque short-term programs for some of this. And I think part of that, whenever I actually look at it, is that it checks the box of we're getting rid of soy, we're getting rid of gluten, we're getting rid of processed stuff. What's your thoughts on doing something like that kind of in short term if you're supplementing for some of the things, including like fish, and that's the ones that I've heard that are doing really well. It was a very well-rounded program in terms of still including lots of different things. It's not just sitting there. I think everybody hears that and they're like, oh, you eat steak for every meal. I'm like, well, no, they're eating a crazy amount of things. What's your thoughts on that?
So, I have a lot of thoughts on that. So the carnivore diet, which comes up fairly often for me in questions, is, what are those animals eating? So they could be eating corn and soybeans and all that stuff. So
Certainly if they're coming from America.
right, exactly. So you're getting it anyway. So that's my first question. And my second question is, I am not a big firm believer of anything majorly drastic. I look back at, what I say to people I work with is I want you to imagine that your body is just like a sneaker factory. You've got all the equipment to make a sneaker. So I know if I give you leather, rubber, or canvas, we're going to get a sneaker at the end, right? And if I put cell phone parts in your sneaker factory, what's going to happen? I mean, if we went to the Nike factory and we said, let's put some cell phone parts in your millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment, what would happen to their equipment? It would break, right? So I use that silly little example because whoever it was who created us, whenever that was, we had some things crawling on the ground and spreading from the earth that we could eat. These will help us sustain ourselves, survive, and procreate, our two main goals as living organisms. So what we've done with modern technology is take that food that was just so simple, crawling on the ground and spreading from the earth, and we have put it into factories, and we've changed the composition, and we've hybrid the vegetables, and we've, added all these chemicals, and we started to have, it's shelf stable. It can last on the shelf for like 3 years. Well, that's great for profits and great for the store owner and great for the manufacturer. But is this good for us? Is this good as bodies that, don't that don't use factory foods to survive, right? It's breaking down our machinery, and it's just that simple. So I really subscribe to the paleo program. I mean, I subscribe to a lot of different ones, but that one for the main, for most people that I use, it's my broadest one that I use because of the fact that we're really just eating what we were made to eat. We're not eating, neon foods that glow in the dark. We're not eating foods that can last on the shelf for three, months or 3 years or, 30 years, for heaven's sakes. I mean, some of these foods can totally survive a nuclear blast, right? So is that what we should be eating?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine that that's a good thing.
Right. So,
Um,
so at the end of the day, it's balance, it's whole foods, and it's variety.
gotcha.
Our bodies need a variety. We like that variety that creates a better environment, right? That's what we call postbiotic short chain fatty acids, right? It gives us the diversity in the microbiome. If we are eating the same 10 foods, we don't have that diversity. Therefore, we cannot repopulate or colonize our good gut bacteria. So this is why we do it.
I think that's why people who say like when they started eating healthier, they're like now whenever I eat something that's kind of off my list, I feel really bad. I don't know if you've heard that where
For
somebody gets
sure.
really restrictive in their diet, and they're like now like every time if I just stray a little bit, I feel bad. There could be an answer to that. That's like, well, maybe you were feeling like that all the time, and now you're just more sensitive to it. But I do see a lot of people who get super, super restrictive. And if we were looking at, kind of, like gut biomarkers, you would probably see that they have a more unhealthy or less diverse gut biome than they had previously.
Mhm.
So it could be some of those, but I do hear that a lot. It's like now I can't enjoy some of the foods that should be healthy for me. And my question is always like, are you getting enough of a diverse, kind of nutritional support for everything?
Exactly. I mean, think about when you go to the produce section. There's so many things in the produce section, I don't know what they are. I don't know what country they come from. I don't know how to pronounce them, right? We don't eat those foods, right? But the people who come from those countries eat those foods. We have a very different microbiome. So the healthiest thing for us to do would be take, one of those, I'll bring it home and put it in the blender, whip it up and drink it, and that would create more diversity in a microbiome.
Love it. You mentioned like B vitamins and D vitamins. Uh, those are important for a lot of reasons, but if we're looking at supplements and thyroid health, what are some of the big kind of bang for buck supplements that tend to be important across the spectrum?
Yeah, well, in addition to the D, I mean, D deficiency is hugely important. I mean, having the right amount of vitamin D, and we like between 80 and 100. I know the labs usually go 30 to 80 or 30 to 100, which is quite low. It's anti-cancer, anti-aging, but it's imperative for thyroid, and everything, heart, brain, gut. We will not make bone without vitamin D. I don't care how much calcium you eat or you take. Vitamin D is critical. Vitamin B as well is, critical for RNA, DNA, but everything else. I mean, methylation, I won't get into that, but all that stuff, vitamin B is really important for. And then if you're eating a wide array of vegetables and fishes and things like that, you're getting enough iodine and minerals that you should be, for a healthy thyroid. If you're not, then there, as I mentioned, I have that OptiThyroid supplement. I have a couple of thyroid supplements that I use depending on what the scenario is. I can have some to calm down the TSH. I can have some to help with conversion, things like that. But I don't typically give those unless, we need to. We've seen a blood test and we need to, and that's short term. But the other thing is, it's really important to take anti-inflammatories. I take turmeric and omega fish oils, my omega max and my turmeric max, resveratrol. So if you're in an autoimmune state, so let's say you have Graves or Hashis or really any autoimmune, I have my Fab Five for this is my fire hose, right? It's the vitamin D, it's the omega, turmeric, resveratrol, glutathione, which is our major master antioxidant. So it really, really it's helpful. It protects us against any oxidative stress. So that's anything that wants to come into the body, cause disease. And that's the Fab Five. You're getting in my office no matter what if you have autoimmune disease.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. how much changes if we are hypo versus hyper in terms of trying to do some of these things, like some of the things that we've talked about before? Is there different recommendations from hypothyroid to hyper?
For sure. So if you're hyperthyroid and you're on overdrive, I would not give you any iodine at all. It's like giving, gas to the fire. And if you're hypo, then I probably would. I don't supplement with iodine unless I've tested you for iodine, but most people don't need that much iodine. We can get it from our diet. And so I would say that you would probably could use more iodine. There's a lot of controversy over iodine and Hashimoto's. So there's two camps. One says don't take it if you have Hashis, and some say take it, you need it. So I just say get it through your food because we can get it naturally from our food. So seafood and seaweed and things like that, we can get it through. So those would definitely be changed. Two things that I would not recommend. I wouldn't recommend soy for either one, or gluten or really dairy for either one.
Gotcha. Yeah, what's the new little thing that people are taking, like seaweed? I don't know. It looks like seaweed jelly or something like that. Are you familiar with
Oh,
that?
the sea moss.
Yes. Is
Yeah,
that is that? I imagine that's got to be high in iodine as well,
yeah.
right?
There's iodine in that for sure. Yeah,
I've had multiple questions about that, and I'm
yeah,
like, I've got nothing. That's new for me.
yeah. Well, there's iodine, and I think that's pretty high in antioxidants too.
Yeah, it's the seems to be the latest
Yeah,
superfood, as they
most
have
expensive.
hijacked some of that
Right.
for testing that stuff. So I do a spectral cell test like twice a year. There's a bunch of kind of newer like blood tests that are sent to your home that are looking at micronutrients, that are looking at hormones. Do you like those things to be able to look at and stay ahead? Like my last test told me that I was low in B2 and selenium. Interesting. I'm geeking out on that. Like, what's changed? What did I do? What's happened? I get excited when I see those things. I'm like,
For sure.
all right, let's roll the sleeves up. What's happening?
Yeah.
So same thing. Like, Brazil nuts. Started eating a couple of those. My B2 was quite low, so I'm supplementing there and increasing some B vitamins. And it's almost June, so I'll have another test in about 2 weeks.
Right.
Um, so what's your are you just ordering those things? Do you like the ones that are kind of these regularly scheduled? If you do, are there any that you really like?
Yeah, so I've used SpectraCell for sure in the past a lot. And I find that, first of all, I love information, right? I'm not really good at playing darts with the lights off and I cannot see the target. So I love information. So I always think, should I get this test? Probably yes. If you can afford it and you're interested in it, for sure, get the test. But you have to keep in mind that it's transient as well. So it's that moment and that time and that space. So that day you might have just been, you might have had a lot of coffee that blocks B vitamins, or you might have had, alcohol that, blocks your magnesium or your B vitamins, things like that. So you have to keep in mind that there are foods that block nutrients. And you just might not have been eating a lot of selenium rich foods that, that past week or something like that. So just keep in mind with that and keep checking. But yeah, I always like to see markers for sure. I used to do a lot of food allergy testing. I still do a little bit, but not as much as I used to, because I realized that the food allergies, I'd get these back and these people would be like, oh my God, I can't eat anything. And I would say, oh yeah, well, there's water. And so I realized that it isn't the problem. It's just the side effect of a leaky gut. So the problem is really that we have gaping holes in our intestinal lining because we only have one layer of epithelial cells in that intestinal lining. So it's really fragile. When you break that open, these foods are going to go in and cause an inflammatory response, right? It's going to create an antibody, and that's what you're getting tested for, these antibodies. So I don't really focus on that as much unless somebody's having major issues. I'm working with somebody right now who has a chronic cough, and we were able to get it down to about 20% of what it was. So I mean, it drastically better. But now I'm starting to go, okay, what's your mattress, and what sheets do you use, and where is there mold, and so I'm starting to get a little deep. And I said we got to order a food allergy test because it could be some food allergy that he's having to this, that's creating this cough, because I addressed everything else, and I addressed the digestion, which can cause a chronic cough. So anyway, so I use it as a next level test to see what's happening. As I said, things change, and I'm always looking at the root cause, not really the symptoms of the root cause.
Yeah, love that. I think I'm with you. It's like from my standpoint, information is good if you look at it as just like more information. I'm always a little bit hesitant when patients have a very big belief system around what information means to them, and that's always something is like, take this from the pain world. If we tell you you've got a slight bulging disc, that's to me not big information. Most of us have that stuff. To you, that might be very, very catastrophic. And so
Right.
that part is always like use information for what it is.
And
It's
I do
just
a lot.
more data.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally get that. But I also do a lot of genetic testing now. And what's so interesting about the genetic test I use is that people have a genetic propensity to maybe need to supplement a vitamin E or a vitamin A, or you just don't, you tend to not be able to absorb from diet or sun vitamin D or something like that. So I love this test. And what's great is it tells you how likely you are to have low bone mass or Achilles tendon issues, or how frequent of a, are you a snacker genetically? Do you like to snack? What's your endurance? We do have a whole thing on working out, which is so fascinating to me, and I work with a lot of athletes, so I'm always so interested to see, like, these people are usually very enhanced in all those areas, which is super cool. But genetics play a part in this. It's not just what you eat, it's your genetics. So that's another element I'd look at.
I have a good friend who did genetic testing on all his whole family, all his kids. He's got 3 kids, and he sat down with them and basically went through their genetics and said, listen, our genetics show that we have a less resilient vascular system than other people. And so what that means for you is that where your friends might be able to get away with like smoking a cigarette or something, the inflammation that would cause in our vascular system, we can't get away with it. Mm-hmm. Where your friends might be able to get away with kind of like, having an unhealthy or inflammatory diet, for you, it's going to be more important. I'm not saying you can't try some of these things, but it's going to be much more important for us to kind of, follow and really work to be healthier, because here's what our genetic makeup is. I was like, that's brilliant, because you're not just saying don't do these things because I said so. You're like, look, these are the cards we have. Here's what that means. Still make your own choices, but I'm trying to teach you with it. I was like,
I
that's,
love
of
that.
course he's a practitioner and science minded, and so he's kind of talking to him from that. But I was
I
like, as a
love it.
kid, for me,
Okay,
I would have been all about that. Like, just tell me
right?
why.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah.
What genetic tests are you looking at, Risa?
So I do a test that is called nutrigenomics, and basically it does vitamins and minerals, and the exercise, and then exercise in relation to weight loss, and exercise genetics. So when it's, do you need to work out more than the average, than the recommended, in order to lose weight, or is that just excess? It's not going to help you. What great information to know, right? So, and then do you, eating habits. So are you a snacker? Do you have more an enhanced ability to taste fat? And what are your sugar preferences? How's your metabolism? How do you do with gluten? Are you likely to have celiac? How do you do with dairy? So I think those nutritional components of your genes is super important. I hope that when my grandchildren are born, which hopefully won't be too long from now, but I hope, which I don't think is going to happen, but maybe my great grandchildren, I hope that every baby born, they'll take their blood and say, here's your genetic makeup. And this is not necessarily your destination, but genetics load the gun, and your lifestyle and environment pull the trigger. So just like your friend said, here's what the gun looks like, and here's the lifestyle that you have to do if you want to avoid these things, right? And I love that. We should have this information, right?
Yeah, so good. I mean, we all have a different set of challenges, and we all have a different set of like kind of superpowers. having the data to make those decisions. And it doesn't mean that again, you don't kind of, quote unquote cheat or get off track or something, but you know what lane you need to be in more often than not. And that's
Exactly.
just for all of us. Is that something that people can have access to online? Is that something you can order? I haven't heard of that
No,
one.
I don't have it online, but they can get it through working with me. And it's great. I think it's like a great holiday gift too. I would just get it for everyone you know. And it's you just need to do it one time because it's your
Right.
genes, right? So it's a
Yeah.
great thing. One of the things that I think is really helpful is our genetics for cholesterol, because unfortunately the marketing around cholesterol is still exactly the same as it was in the 80s, and that, we're all going to have heart attacks if we have high cholesterol, and that's not the case. It's inflammation and plaque buildup. But cholesterol, is a factor in cardiovascular disease. And, I have high genetics. All of our genetics, we all run high. So how high is high? That's a different question. But slightly over 200 is not a problem for somebody who has a genetic makeup to having high cholesterol. Because no matter what I do, even when I was a vegan, I had super high cholesterol, and that for me, it was in the 300s, but there were other factors going on then. But I mean, it just doesn't correlate with our dietary cholesterol intake most of the time.
One of the things that we got a bunch of questions on was like kind of detoxification surrounding thyroid health, and is there good ways of doing detox? Is there less effective way? And what are we kind of trying to accomplish with that? So what I thought. Kind of my initial thought around that is like, okay, what toxins are we coming in contact with that are negatively affecting thyroid health?
Amazing question. So, unfortunately, the answer is tons of them. And the FDA, this is a current number, and I'm sad to report it, but the FDA has approved 86,000 chemicals for us to use. 86,000. So more than any other country on the entire planet. And we're approved about 2 to 6,000 a year, no matter, regardless of who's in the White House. So it's a really bad situation. The average American female comes in contact with over 200 chemicals before she's left the bathroom each morning. And think about, like, I see young girls getting their hair dyed. I mean, this is just chemicals. The nail polish, the makeup, the deodorant is a huge one, because for women we shave our arms and then we put it right in our bloodstream. And everybody's got fake nails, right? And now we have fake eyelashes, and with the glue that's on the fake eyelashes, I'm assuming, I don't know, but it's all chemicals. These are all chemicals that our body's absorbing day in and day out, let alone what we're breathing. Every Uber you get into has a Febreze or some kind of an air freshener. And it's everywhere. It's in our food, it's in our air, it's everywhere. And glyphosate, which is ready Roundup, that's what we use as a strong herbicide and pesticide, and that is a major endocrine disruptor. We are already seeing all the effects of infertility, um, partly because thyroid, a low T3 will be very difficult for fertility. MTHFR gene mutation, it affects fertility. And chemicals really, for men and for women, they are major hormone disruptors, and therefore we're going to see an increasing rate of infertility, which is crazy to me, right? So chemicals are everywhere, and we have to be extremely diligent on decreasing our toxic load. I created my detox, a 14-day detox that I use all the time. I'm actually drinking a detox shake right now, because why wouldn't I want to detoxify my liver and clean out my blood every chance I have the opportunity to? I don't do it every day, but I do it often, and I do my 14-day detox 2 to 3 times a year. It's a gentle process with amino acids and antioxidants that help open up those pathways. And we really stay away from all the chemicals during those 14 days. We get off coffee and alcohol, coffee if we can. And definitely coffee is a really toxic beverage. So, it's highly sprayed, it's got mold a lot of times. So organic coffee is really the way to go. And if you have to have coffee, and then of course, let's take out the chemicals that we put into the coffee that makes it so delicious, right? I talked to somebody yesterday who puts whipped cream in her coffee every. She's like, "Oh my God, you have no idea how good it is." I'm sure it's good. So anyway, if we take out those chemicals and we eat clean, we eat, 2 collagen shakes a day, and we're eating clean food. We should have 60 to 80% of our plate every meal being some live foods. It can be cooked, but it needs to come from the ground, right? And then we have this natural ability to get those toxins out. I love my detox. I put everybody on it when I first work with them. And, people love it because they lose weight, but it's not a weight loss program. It's, weight loss is a side effect of wellness. It's a wellness program. But we clean out the liver, because if your liver is congested, your whole body's not going to function optimally. So and there's lots of detoxes out there, and I've tried pretty much all of them. So I find this to be the most enjoyable, the safest, and most effective.
Is it low calorie? Is it like quite low calorie on the 14 days or?
I do not count calories. They are units of energy, as you know, that are not created equal. So I count more carbs than I count anything, because carbs create pancreas to pump out more insulin and causing more blood sugar dysregulation and inflammation at the end of the day. But no, it is eat when you're hungry, don't when you're not, because we have this amazing natural ability to create ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, and leptin, which is our satiation hormone. And if we listen to that, and if we don't suppress that, and they're working, we should be able to eat a really good. I talked to a patient yesterday. She's like, I'm eating more than I've ever eaten. She's lost, I think, 35 pounds, and she's completely removed 100% of her major debilitating pain that she was having with rheumatoid arthritis. And she's like, I eat whatever I want. I'm like, isn't it amazing? You're not even on a diet, but you're eating protein, fat, and fiber. That's what I always focus on: protein, fat, and fiber.
Are there certain things that people can use to kind of bring in to encourage some of the detox?
You mean expedite the process when you're
Hmm.
on the detox?
Yep.
Sure, you can do infrared sauna. That will help. Any kind of sweat, we expel our toxins through feces, urine, breath, and sweat. So absolutely, infrared saunas are really good at detoxing. But working out, going for a run and breathing, getting your oxygen recycled. And then if you're not pooping every day, there's a problem, right? We gotta make sure we're pooping every day and urinating and having half our body weight in ounces every day in clean water.
For most of these kind of things that are changes, what that sounds to me like, this is kind of broad ranging, but I'm like, there's not a ton of people other than like the very specific like supplementation and stuff, but the broad scopes of this, it seems like, as important as thyroid health is to so many areas of our body, our function, that most of us should be doing some version of these things.
For sure.
Different sliding scales, but should we be looking at and testing just regularly for thyroid health throughout our life, just to make sure I'm staying on the right track? The same thing we were talking about with micronutrients. Is that something that once a year we should be running some of those tests at a certain age?
1,000%. It's like guessing how much money you have in the bank and going to buy a house. Well, how do I know if I can afford it? Like, you have to know. You have to make a plan and save in order to amass a certain amount for a down payment, and can you afford the mortgage payments? So it's the same thing. We just need to know the information on where our thyroid health is, what's working, what's not working. Anybody who's taking thyroid meds and they're on a new med, I would recommend, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks just to do your thyroid, just to have that shift. So just do your thyroid labs after you change medication, because it could take years to figure out which medication is right for you or lifestyle. And you kind of have to keep testing it in order to see which is working for you. So yeah, I'm a big believer, especially in inflammation markers, because I worked with somebody several years ago who came to see me after he had a heart attack, and his cholesterol was at 139. And I'm like, what'd your cardiologist say? And he said, well, he just switched me to a different statin. Like, you've been on statins for 25 years. It isn't the cholesterol that gave you the heart attack. And then we did his inflammation markers, and they were through the roof, like through the roof. So nobody was looking at that. So it's really important to look at everything so that you're not like completely surprised. Oh my God, how did I get cancer? How did I get a heart attack? Right? We gotta have the information.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about like what is the thing that is most likely to take you out? What is the thing the most likely to kill you? And like some of the genetic tests leads to that information. But if people have a decent, you kind of know your family history, you probably have a good idea of that. Hey, the vast majority of men in our family had heart attacks. Okay, that's the 80% of your energy needs to go towards, keeping inflammation down, keeping healthy vessels, keeping a healthy cardiovascular system, testing for those things. If most people in your family had cancer, then you're like, okay, what are the steps I need to do to keep inflammation down still, maybe more globally, to keep cellular health and cell signaling good, to make sure you're cleaning out those damaged cells and altered DNA cells at a regular interval, quarterly, people
Mhm.
listening. So like, what's that thing? What's that thing that's most likely to try and take you out, and let's at least prevent that one.
Exactly.
Um, I love that stuff. I think this has brought up some thoughts. You were talking about kind of the person who brought that down. If you have a couple of these kind of examples of somebody who's made major changes, can you take us through what like a 12-month process for that might look like? Like you said, you start them on many people on kind of the detox and maybe the like Fab Five type of situation. I know every case is different, but if you have one or two that gives a little example of that.
Yeah, so I always start with the detox, and I'll give you this story because I think a lot of people know him and they could relate to this. He's on my website, so I can share the story. But Freddie Couples, he's a professional golfer. He's one of the greatest golfers of all time, and he called me several years ago and said, "Hey, I want to lose 20 pounds before the Masters." I'm like, "No problem, come on in." So he comes in, and I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about the back pain," because I had known he was famous for his back pain. He had been carted off, wheeled off golf courses with massive, major pain. And so I'm sure you would appreciate the story. But anyway, um, we worked together and we're talking, and he's telling me about everything he does for his back, and he travels with his physical therapist, and so he tells me those stories, and this doctor in Germany, and this other doctor, all these things, and I go, well, what about the surgeries? He said, oh, I haven't had any surgeries. And I'm like, has anybody tested you for inflammation? The guy lives, both of his homes are on golf courses. He works on golf courses. And so he's breathing chemicals day in and day out. He was having smell sensitivity, right? So if he got into an Uber or a cab or something, he had to close his nose because he would get headaches from smell sensitivity. And I mean, it was just so adding up for me. And I said, I'm going to test you for some inflammation markers. He goes, test me for whatever you need to. Sure enough, they came back massively high, all his inflammatory markers. And not a terrible eater, but he's traveling all the time. So he's never having home cooked meals with good oils, and he's just grabbing and going. So I put him on my detox. He told me that his pain level, I always ask people, what's your pain? 1 to 10, 10 being excruciating, unlivable. He said he's at about a 7 or an 8 every day, depending on how much he swings the club. And I put him on my detox. And that first week, he came in to see me and weigh in and everything. And I said, how do you feel? What's your pain level? And he said, I'm at a 4. And every time after I had that time I had seen him, it was always a 0 or 1. So I love this story because we just got rid of his inflammation through food. I had him on a lot of the Fab Fives, right? He was on, I had him, taking a bottle of turmeric with him to the golf course and chugging it when he needed it. But he was on a lot of turmeric, and we got rid of his back pain. I love that story because it's like, he'd had it for decades. So the typical trajectory of what I do is I meet with somebody, I get all the information, I put them on my detox, I order the labs. You're leaving my office with a comprehensive bioscreen, so I'm going to see all 9 markers of your thyroid, all 4 markers of your blood sugar. I'm going to see your iron. I'm going to see your inflammatory markers, your white blood cells, everything. I'm going to see really everything. And then after that, I'm giving you a stool test, and I'm going to see 84 pathogens. I'm going to see the good guys, the bad guys, what the imbalance is, if there is. I'm going to see H. pylori. I'm going to see giardia, yeast, fungus, parasites, worms. I'm going to see how much digestive enzymes or pancreatic enzymes you're producing. I'm going to see your inflammation, leaky gut. on and on and on and on. I'm getting tons of information from these two labs, and I also test you for MTHFR. Once I get there, then I go, okay, depending on what the problem is, I pretty much have a pathway. I know how to eat. I know what supplements are going to help quell whatever we need to address. And then if we need to do a deeper dive, then I do. Great story. I worked with a gal fairly recently, and she came to see me, late 20s. Beautiful girl, active, could not lose weight, was having major digestive issues, chronic diarrhea. You'd be amazed at how many people live with chronic diarrhea daily. So I changed her diet. I did the detox. We got the blood. We got the stool. There was a little bit of overgrowth. We started to address it, but her fatigue, her debilitating fatigue would not go away. She would sleep 10, 12 hours. We couldn't figure it out. I tested her for EBV, which she had, and all this stuff. And then finally I said to her, I think we need to do a mold test. And we tested her for mold, and she was through the roof. She had been renting this darling little house with two other roommates. They opened up the walls, and there was tons of mold. So we cleaned her up for mold. She moved out of that place. She is thriving. Lost all her weight. I mean, we took care of that really at the beginning, and then her stomach issues, but her fatigue is gone. So it's like I'm a chaser. Like if we can't find it, I'm going to keep going. Keep turning over stones.
I love it. Yeah, that's the whole person like kind of approach is, there's not one system working in isolation. Let's dig. There's something if you're not feeling like you should. There's something in there. I love that. I love your approach. I love what you're doing, Risa. As always, you're a wealth of knowledge. Much appreciated. I've got like pages of notes that I'm gonna go back and dig into, and I've got about 4 or 5 patients that I'm like, this episode is earmarked for you. Y'all will get it shortly. Where can people find out about the thyroid course? Where can people find out? I know you had a book out. Where can they find out how they can work with you? Give us all the details.
Yeah, everything is on my website at Risa Groux Nutrition. It's Risa. Groux is Groux. Nutrition. I'm in Newport Beach, California, but I do work with everybody nationwide and via Zoom, and everything is there. My course, Achieving Optimal Thyroid Health, my book, Food Frame, Diet is 4-letter word, you can find there, and as well as Target and Barnes and Noble and Amazon. And then all my diet types are there. My Food Frame quiz is there, which is the right food eating lifestyle for you. And then all social media is Risa Groux Nutrition.
Love it. As you know, we ask all our guests a question at the end of this, and I'm going to hold you to a new answer to this. So we ask everybody, y'all know this, if somebody's listening to this and they can do one thing today to improve their health, what would that be? Last time it was get the processed foods out. Don't eat any processed foods today. So if somebody can do one other thing today to get healthier, what would they do, Risa?
So hard to say one thing. And maybe taking out the chemicals is the same thing as processed food, but I'm talking about chemicals in your house, chemicals in your shampoos, chemicals in your cleaning supplies. Take them out and go natural.
I'll allow it. That's a little bit cheating, but I'll allow it.
I have 5 other ones if you want them.
Sure, shoot.
Yeah, take out sugar. Sugar is the devil. It's highly inflammatory. We glean no nutrition from it, so that's definitely one. Um, Gluten, kind of separate from your relationship with gluten and use it as a moderation food, not as a sport food. And unplug. Definitely unplug. Have fun.
So valuable, so valuable. All of this stuff is done to help us live a better life, a happier life, more productive, more effective life. So like to not get and tap into that and have that family time and laugh and cut up and experience something new and go somewhere and hike some hard thing and do that. Like that's why we do all this stuff.
Right.
Don't forget that. Don't get so wrapped up in these things that you forget to live. So I
Exactly.
love it. Risa, thank you so much. You're amazing. Much appreciated. Yeah, y'all reach out to us again. We had so many good questions after this. We might have to make this a yearly catch up.
I'd love it. Thank you so much, Derek.
Awesome. Thanks, Risa.